Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, silent ocean. The waves move in and out, never rushing, never halting, just flowing with an effortless rhythm. Now close your eyes for a moment and listen, not to the ocean, but to your own breath. Is it deep, steady, or is it shallow, quick, restless? Fletcher tells us something profound, something so simple yet so powerful that most of us never stop to notice it. She tells us that breath is more than just air moving in and out of our lungs. It is life itself, the rhythm that governs not only our bodies but our emotions, our thoughts, and even our very existence. She begins with a striking truth. Breath is the first thing we do when we enter this world, and the last thing we do before we leave it. It is the one constant, the silent thread that ties every moment of our lives together. And yet, despite its constancy, most of us never give it a second thought. We breathe without thinking, without awareness, allowing our emotions and anxieties to dictate the rhythm of our breath, when in truth, it should be the other way around. Have you ever noticed how, in moments of fear, your breath shortens, your chest tightens, your shoulders lift, and your entire body braces as if waiting for some unseen blow? But in moments of deep peace, when you are sitting beneath a tree on a quiet afternoon, or listening to the sound of waves lapping against the shore, your breath slows, deepens, spreads warmth through your chest. Fletcher tells us that this is no accident. Breath is not just a reflection of our emotions, it is their very foundation. The way we breathe shapes the way we feel. The hurried, erratic breathing of anxiety does not come after worry. It creates it, fuels it, cements it into place. And just as easily, the deep, steady breath of calm can call forth peace, even in the midst of chaos. She reminds us that every living thing moves with rhythm. The tide moves in cycles, the seasons turn, even our hearts beat in a pattern. And just as music would collapse into discord without rhythm, so too does the mind when the breath is left ungoverned, unsteady, and without order. Ancient civilizations understood what we have forgotten. The sages of the East, the yogis, the philosophers of old, they all knew that breath is the key to unlocking the mind. They practiced breath control, not as an exercise, not as a luxury, but as a necessity, because they knew that only through rhythmic breathing could one master the self. Fletcher tells us that when breath is chaotic, the mind follows suit. Thoughts race, emotions surge uncontrollably, and life itself feels unsteady, as if we are being tossed about by an unseen storm. But when breath is measured, deliberate, and in harmony with the natural rhythm of life, the mind stills, worries quieten, strength returns. Have you ever seen a person in deep meditation? Their breath is not forced, not hurried. It flows as naturally as a river, unbroken, undisturbed. And in that very steadiness, they find something most people spend their lives searching for: control over their own emotions. Not suppression, not denial, but true mastery. Fletcher could not have predicted the world we live in now, a world of constant noise, of flashing screens and endless distractions, and yet, what she wrote over a century ago feels as if it was meant for us. She speaks of how the modern world, even in her time, was losing touch with this ancient wisdom, how people had forgotten how to breathe properly, how the rush of daily life had shortened their breath, fragmented their thoughts, and left them restless, anxious, disconnected from their inner peace. Now, more than ever, we see the consequences. Stress disorders, anxiety, exhaustion. These are not just products of our minds, they are written in our very breath, in the short, shallow gasps we take as we rush from one task to another, barely aware of the life force we are misusing. Fletcher urges us to reclaim what we have lost, to slow down. We feel our breath as it moves in and out, not as a passive act, but as something deliberate, something sacred. Because in doing so, we do not just change the way we breathe, we change the way we live. The first step, she says, is awareness. To listen to our breath as we would listen to the wind rustling through the trees, to notice when it is shallow, when it is rushed, when it falters under the weight of our emotions, and then to gently guide it back, to let it lengthen, deepen, fall into a steady rhythmic pattern, not forced, not strained, just natural. And with that simple shift, the storm of emotions that once felt uncontrollable starts to settle. Thoughts become clearer. Anxiety loses its grip. Because when the breath is calm, the mind cannot help but follow. There is something deeply reassuring about what Fletcher tells us, that peace is not something distant, not something we must chase endlessly or hope to stumble upon. It is already within us, waiting to be uncovered. And the key? It has been with us all along. It is not in the noise of the outside world, not in the fleeting distractions or empty pursuits. It is in something as simple, as fundamental as the breath moving in and out of our own lungs. The rhythm of breath is the rhythm of life, and in learning to control one, we learn to master the other. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, lost in a storm of thoughts, take a moment, close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out, slowly, steadily. The ocean does not rush, yet it moves endlessly. The trees do not force their growth, yet they stand tall and unwavering. And you, when you breathe in harmony with life's natural rhythm, will find that same unshakable peace. Fletcher knew the truth, and now so do you. But understanding is only the first step. Knowledge alone does not steady the breath, nor does it still the mind. It must be lived, practiced, woven into the fabric of your being. For if breath is the key, then rhythm is the hand that turns the lock. This is where the journey deepens. Fletcher leads us beyond awareness and into mastery, where breath is no longer a passive act, but an instrument. An instrument that, when played with care, can bring forth a life of balance, strength, and unshaken peace. Fletcher tells us that the breath is the link between the seen and the unseen, the bridge between the material world and the realm of thought. She speaks of the ancient understanding that creation itself begins with breath, not just physical birth, but the birth of ideas, emotions, and experiences. When we breathe in a slow, steady rhythm, something remarkable happens. Our thoughts become ordered, our emotions settle, and we begin to align ourselves with the greater rhythms of existence. But when the breath is chaotic, fractured, or shallow, the mind follows suit. It is in this understanding that Fletcher reveals a secret long known to mystics and philosophers. The breath, when harnessed with intention, becomes the means by which we shape our reality. It is quite literally the master key of creation. A single deep breath can change a moment. In an instant, frustration dissolves, tension eases, clarity emerges. Now extend that principle beyond a single breath, beyond a single moment, into the entirety of life. If each breath carries with it a silent force, an unseen influence, then to breathe with purpose is to create with purpose. Fletcher calls this the highest act of self-mastery, the ability to direct one's breath as one directs the course of their life. She insists that through rhythmic breathing, we become architects of our emotions, our circumstances, and even our destinies. In the rush of modern life, we often feel powerless, swept along by forces beyond our control. But Fletcher reminds us that the ability to shape our experience has never been outside of us. It has always been within, waiting to be realized. Breath is not just the sustainer of life, it is the force that directs it. The moment we understand this, everything changes. We are no longer victims of circumstance, but creators of our own fate, using the most fundamental act to craft the life we desire. She speaks of those who have mastered this art, those who breathe not as a reflex but as a conscious act. They move with certainty, unshaken by the tempests of life. Their thoughts are clear, their emotions balanced, their presence commanding. It is no mystery that such people radiate peace. They have aligned themselves with the universal rhythm that governs all things. Their breath does not falter, and so neither do they. To Fletcher, this is not an esoteric practice meant only for the spiritually inclined. It is a fundamental law, available to all who choose to embrace it. She does not speak of impossible feats or unattainable enlightenment. She speaks of a truth that has always been present, waiting for recognition. And when it is recognized, when one truly grasps the power of rhythmic breath, life itself becomes a work of art. The tide does not rush forward chaotically, nor does it recede with hesitation. It follows an order, a cadence as old as time. This is the essence of the breath that Fletcher describes, a force that, when properly harnessed, flows effortlessly, guiding us through life's challenges and triumphs. The ocean does not question its rhythm, and neither should we. Our breath, when aligned with nature's order, brings a profound sense of harmony. Fletcher points to ancient traditions where the breath was seen as sacred, not merely a function of survival, but the very essence of existence. The yogis of India, the sages of China, the philosophers of Greece all recognized that control over the breath meant control over the self. She reminds us that modern science is only now catching up with what these ancient traditions knew. Breath influences the nervous system, stabilizes the mind, and even affects the body's ability to heal. When we breathe with purpose, we tap into a power that goes beyond mere survival. We enter a state of creation. But what does it mean to breathe with purpose? Fletcher is clear. It is not simply deep breathing, nor is it erratic, forced inhalations. It is a rhythmic, measured flow like a gentle tide, neither rushed nor restrained. This rhythm aligns with the fundamental patterns of nature, reinforcing our connection to the larger universe. The breath is a tool, yes, but more than that, it is a guide, a mentor, leading us toward greater awareness and control over our own existence. Think back to moments of true clarity in your life, a time when all worries seemed to dissolve, when inspiration struck like lightning, when you felt truly present. Fletcher would argue that in these moments, your breath was not frantic or disordered. It was aligned, steady, and in tune with the natural flow of life. It was in these moments that you were not simply existing, but actively creating. She challenges us to practice this awareness, to bring intention to the breath, not just in moments of stress, but in every moment. To see the breath not as a passive function, but as a deliberate act, a choice to shape our experience. As we do this, we begin to notice the change not just in how we feel, but in how life responds to us. A mind governed by rhythmic breath becomes clear, a heart guided by steady inhalation and exhalation grows calm, and a life shaped by intentional breathing becomes one of purpose. So take a moment now. Inhale deeply, not just as an automatic function, but with intent. Feel the breath move through you, steady, measured, full of purpose. And as you exhale, release the belief that life is beyond your control. Because as Fletcher tells us, within your breath lies the power to shape, to create, to master your emotions and your destiny. The key has always been in your hands, or rather, in your lungs. The question is, will you use it? But breath is more than mere air moving in and out of the body. It is a force, a current that carries our emotions, our thoughts, and even our destiny. Fletcher reveals that, while breath holds the power to create, to transform, and to shape reality, one must first learn how to truly master it. It is not enough to understand that breath controls the mind. One must grasp the method, the pathway to wielding it consciously. This is the art of gaining the master key. Fletcher tells us that breath does not act independently, it reflects and responds. When the mind is restless, breath is shallow and erratic. When fear tightens its grip, breath shortens, constricts. When anger surges, the breath is forceful, jagged. Yet, if breath is the reflection of emotion, it must also be the remedy. Here lies the great truth. Just as thoughts can dictate breath, breath in turn can dictate thought. Control the breath and you control the mind. Steady the breath and you steady the heart. Master the breath and you master life. But Fletcher is precise. This mastery is not forced, not an act of suppression. It is a learned harmony, a rhythm in tune with the great natural order. She speaks of how one must begin by first recognizing the chaotic state of their own breathing. How often do we move through our days unconscious of this force, allowing it to mirror our fluctuating emotions without intervention? To gain the master key, one must awaken to the breath, to become aware of its patterns, its irregularities, and its potential. She explains that breath must be trained, much like the mind itself. To regulate breath is to regulate thought. She describes the mind as a wild horse, untamed, pulling in different directions, unfocused. But rhythmic breathing, steady, controlled, deliberate, is the rein that guides this untamed force, shaping it into focus, into clarity. Breath, when mastered, does not follow emotion blindly, it leads. It carves the pathway to serenity, to control, to a higher state of being. This control does not come from effort alone, nor from shallow attempts at deep breathing when the mind is already in disarray. It is a discipline, a practice, a conscious return to the rhythm of life itself. Fletcher describes how through rhythmic breathing, one aligns with the universal currents, tapping into a force far greater than the self. A breath unbroken by doubt or disturbance is a breath that carries strength, balance, and clarity. She emphasizes that gaining this key is not merely about moments of practice, it is about transformation. This is not a technique to be applied when convenient, when emotions grow stormy, when fear arises. This is a way of being, a new foundation upon which to build one's existence. To master the breath is to live within its rhythm at all times, to allow it to be the unshaken guide through all of life's uncertainties. Fletcher reminds us that mastery does not arrive in an instant. It is cultivated and nurtured, a gradual unfolding of awareness and control. There will be moments when emotions attempt to pull breath back into old habits, when fear seeks to constrict it, when worry seeks to fracture it. But the path to mastery is in the return. Again and again, one must bring breath back to its rhythm, train it to be the constant when all else wavers. In this, the true power of the breath is revealed, not just as a response to life, but as the foundation of it. To those who first embark on this path, the effort may seem subtle, almost imperceptible. A few moments of rhythmic breathing, a growing awareness of how breath shifts with emotion. But as Fletcher assures us, this is the beginning of something far greater. The more one aligns breath with rhythm, the more life itself begins to shift. The mind grows clearer, emotions grow steadier, actions become more deliberate, and eventually there comes a realization: life was never meant to be a battle against chaos. The breath has always been there, waiting to be mastered, waiting to be the key that unlocks the higher self. She describes this mastery as an art, one not based on force but on flow. Breath is not to be controlled with rigidity, nor forced into unnatural patterns. Instead, it is to be guided, nurtured, shaped into harmony. It is a process of gentle discipline, of patience, of returning again and again until breath no longer follows emotion, but leads it. Fletcher speaks of breath as the very current that links the finite self with the infinite, a tool that, when mastered, allows one to align with the great universal rhythm. Those who learn to breathe with awareness do not simply live, they move through existence with a sense of harmony and purpose. She offers a warning as well. Misuse of breath leads to imbalance, not only in the body but in the mind, in the very essence of being. There are those who breathe in a scattered, discordant way, and their lives reflect that same disorder. Their emotions are uncontrolled, their thoughts unfocused, their energy wasted, but those who breathe with intention, with rhythm, become centers of peace. Their presence is steady, their thoughts clear, their emotions balanced. Fletcher makes it clear: true mastery of breath is not a fleeting skill, but a lifelong discipline. It is not about controlling breath in moments of distress alone, but about making it a way of being. One does not wait until the storm to learn how to steady the sails. Instead, one cultivates breath as a constant force of stability so that when storms do arise, they are met not with fear but with unshaken calm. And so, as she urges, the practice must begin. Not tomorrow, not when the mind is already overwhelmed, but now. Even in this very moment, there is a breath moving in and out of the body, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be guided into its natural rhythm. The master key is not hidden, not out of reach, it is within, ready to be grasped, ready to unlock a life lived with clarity, balance, and unshaken peace. But breath, though powerful, is only as strong as the will that directs it, and desire, true unwavering desire, is the force that gives it meaning. To understand breath is to understand movement, flow, expansion. But to harness it, To wield its power, one must first know what they seek. Without desire, there is no direction. Without direction, there is no mastery. So, what is it you truly wish to create? Fletcher does not ask us to breathe without purpose. She asks us to breathe with intent, to infuse each inhale with longing and each exhale with certainty. In this lies the essence of what Fletcher reveals the next step: how to use the master key. The breath, she tells us, is not simply a passive function of life, but an active force, a current that connects the depths of one's inner world to the vast expanse of the external universe. To use it consciously is to take hold of the invisible threads that shape our emotions, our thoughts, our very reality. It is here, in this deliberate engagement, that we move from knowledge to transformation. Fletcher teaches us that it is not enough to breathe, one must breathe correctly. The difference between an erratic breath and a measured control breath is the difference between a ship caught in a storm and one guided by a steady wind. And herein lies the first step in using this key: rhythm. A breath ungoverned is a mind ungoverned. A mind ungoverned is an emotion untamed. One cannot hope to control the tides of thought and feeling if the breath moves without harmony, without intent. Fletcher insists that mastery begins in the breath's cadence, its gentle and unwavering consistency. The chaotic mind settles when the breath is steadied. The heart, so often tossed upon waves of anxiety and fear, finds its stillness when the breath moves in time with nature's own pulse. She urges us to observe, to listen to the breath without interfering, to first become aware of its patterns before attempting to alter them. To impose force upon an erratic breath is to disrupt rather than heal. Instead, one must approach it with patience, allowing it to reveal its secrets before gently guiding it into harmony. Only then does the breath become a tool of mastery, rather than a force of disorder. With the breath aligned, Fletcher turns to intention. Every breath taken with awareness carries an imprint of thought, a signature of the mind's condition. The hurried breath of fear, the shallow breath of worry, the deep sigh of relief, each breath is an echo of what lies within. But what if, instead of being a reflection of emotion, the breath became its architect? This is the key she offers: to reverse the process, to shape emotion through breath rather than be shaped by it. To breathe with intent is to infuse the very act of living with purpose. If the breath is steady, the mind follows. If the breath is deep and assured, confidence arises. If the breath is slow and peaceful, calm descends. In this, Fletcher challenges us to consider: what if every breath became a conscious act of shaping one's inner world? What if, with each inhalation, one drew in courage, and with each exhalation released doubt? Yet intention alone is not enough. The breath must be rhythmic, not forced, flowing, not rigid. Many attempt control by holding the breath, mistaking stillness for mastery, but Fletcher warns that to hold the breath unnaturally is to dam a river, creating tension rather than peace. True mastery is not suppression but guidance, allowing breath to move freely while keeping its rhythm intact. As one refines this practice, a remarkable shift occurs. The emotions, once unpredictable, become as pliable as clay in the hands of the sculptor. Fear, once an unbidden guest, can be exhaled away. Confidence, once elusive, can be summoned with the steady inhale. Fletcher insists it is the very nature of breath to dictate the state of being. The nervous system, so often reactive, is trained by the breath's rhythm. The mind, so often scattered, finds its focus in the measured inhale and exhale. This practice extends beyond moments of meditation. To truly use the master key is to carry this awareness into daily life. In moments of stress, one does not succumb to erratic breathing but recalls the steady rhythm cultivated in practice. In moments of uncertainty, one does not allow breath to falter but breathes in deeply, affirming stability. Fletcher speaks of this as the great art of self-regulation, not a fleeting technique but a way of being, a discipline that grants sovereignty over the self. She describes the breath as the silent composer of life's symphony. Each person, whether aware or unaware, conducts their existence through the rhythm of their breath. Those who breathe without awareness, without rhythm, live lives dictated by the chaos of circumstance. But those who take hold of their breath's rhythm take hold of something far greater, their own emotions, their own mind, their own destiny. To breathe with mastery is to live with mastery, and to live with mastery is to no longer be at the mercy of passing emotions, but to command them as one commands the tides, shaping life with the invisible yet undeniable force of breath. This is the key Fletcher offers, the step beyond knowledge into true practice. The breath, so often taken for granted, is revealed as the greatest tool of all, a master key unlocking the hidden strength within. Yet a key, no matter how powerful, must still be turned. Awareness alone is not enough. Fletcher now takes us deeper, beyond the mere recognition of breath and into the art of directing its force. For breath, when shaped with purpose, does more than sustain life, it fuels it. It carries the very currents of vitality, circulating through every fibre of our being, awakening energies long dormant. But how does one guide this force? How does one ensure that breath does not simply pass through the body, but nourishes it, strengthens it, transforms it? Fletcher speaks now of harmony, of rhythm not as a concept, but as a living pulse within us, aligning us with something greater. The breath must move not in chaos, not in hesitation, but in perfect synchrony with the law that governs all things. Fletcher introduces us to the concept of the tattvas, the subtle energies that form the foundation of the material and spiritual world. These energies, invisible to the eye yet deeply felt within the soul, move in cycles, flowing through the body in accordance with the rhythm of the breath. She describes how each inhalation and exhalation is a portal through which these forces enter and exit, shaping not only our physical state, but our emotional and mental equilibrium. This is not an abstraction, not a metaphor, but a deeply practical truth. The way we breathe determines the quality of our thoughts, our moods, and our ability to navigate the ever-changing tides of life. The breath, when left untamed, follows the chaos of our emotions. When fear grips the heart, it is the breath that stumbles first, shallow, erratic, strained. When sorrow takes hold, the breath falters, sinking into slow, heavy sighs. Anger sets the breath aflame, fast and forceful, an unsteady current that fuels the fire of frustration. But Fletcher insists that this relationship is not one-directional. We are not merely victims of emotional storms, tossed about by forces beyond our control. The breath, when guided with wisdom, can reverse the tide, turning sorrow into serenity, anger into clarity, fear into resolve. Understanding the tattvas means understanding that breath is not just air moving through the lungs, but a vehicle for energy, for transformation. Each tattva carries a distinct vibration, a particular resonance that influences both body and mind. Fletcher explains that these energies cycle throughout the day, and when one becomes attuned to their rhythm, life itself takes on a new harmony. No longer is the individual at the mercy of unpredictable emotions. Instead, they become a conscious participant in the unfolding dance of energy within. The first step in mastering this process is awareness. Fletcher urges the reader to observe the breath, not to change it immediately, but not to impose control, to simply notice. Where does the breath settle? Is it confined to the chest, quick and restless? Does it reach deep into the abdomen, steady and full? She describes how each type of breathing aligns with a different emotional state, and how, by understanding these correspondences, one can begin to shift their inner world with intention. But to truly use the breath as a master key, one must learn to breathe in rhythm with the universal order. Fletcher speaks of breath control not as a mechanical exercise, but as a sacred practice, one that aligns the self with the deeper currents of existence. She describes how each tattva exerts its influence during specific times of the day, and those who learn to breathe in harmony with these cycles gain a profound advantage. There is a time for action, a time for reflection, a time for rest. The breath, when synchronized to these natural rhythms, becomes a tool for attuning oneself to the higher intelligence that governs life. She further explores the way breath affects the nervous system, demonstrating that when one breathes in alignment with these subtle energies, the body responds in kind. The tension held in muscles, the restlessness of the mind, even the involuntary habits that shape one's daily interactions begin to transform. It is not willpower alone that changes these patterns, it is the breath, acting as an intermediary between the conscious and the unconscious, the material and the immaterial. Fletcher describes how those who have mastered the breath exhibit a presence that is unmistakable. They walk with a quiet confidence, an unshakable calm that is not the absence of emotion but the mastery of it. This is the power of rhythmic breathing. Not to suppress feeling, not to disengage from the world, but to meet every experience with the clarity and strength that comes from being in harmony with life's fundamental forces. And yet, she warns, this mastery is not achieved overnight. It requires patience, practice, and above all, consistency. The breath must become a conscious companion, not just in moments of meditation or solitude, but in the midst of daily life, during conversation, during movement, during the most ordinary of tasks. She urges the reader to cultivate this awareness, not as a rigid discipline, but as a returning, again and again, to the source of their own power. The evolution of the tattvas within the individual mirrors the evolution of the soul itself. As the breath deepens, so does understanding. As the breath steadies, so does the mind. Each cycle of breath carries with it the potential for transformation, for growth, for a new way of being. This is not an esoteric philosophy reserved for mystics and sages. It is a universal truth, available to all who choose to listen, to observe, to breathe with intention. In the quiet spaces between each inhale and exhale lies a secret that Fletcher invites us to discover. A truth that has always been present, waiting to be acknowledged. The breath is not just life, it is the key to understanding the self, to navigating the ever-changing landscape of emotion, to unlocking the deeper currents of existence that flow beneath the surface of everyday awareness. And so, she leaves us with an invitation, a challenge, to step into this rhythm, to make it our own, to breathe not just as an unconscious reflex, but as an act of mastery, of creation, of life itself. However, mastery is not achieved through mere recognition. To truly claim this power, one must go further, deeper into the unseen forces that govern not only breath, but the very essence of vitality. Fletcher now turns our attention to the great circulating energy within, the pulse of life that does not merely sustain but renews, replenishes, and strengthens. This is more than breath. It is the force that moves through us, unseen yet undeniable, influencing body, mind, and spirit. These forces are known as the tattvas, and they are not confined to the body alone. They are universal, flowing through the entire cosmos, shaping the unseen currents of life itself. We begin to understand that every inhalation is a conduit for these cosmic energies. They enter us, influencing our moods, our decisions, and the way we perceive the world. They are neither passive nor random. They follow precise rhythms, governing the tides of our emotions just as they guide the movements of the stars. Fletcher teaches that to truly harness the power of breath is to align with these universal forces, to step into a flow that extends beyond ourselves. This understanding is what sets rhythmic breath apart from the ordinary unconscious breathing of daily life. Just as the ocean sways with the gravitational pull of the moon, so too does human emotion shift with the patterns of breath. A chaotic breath brings about a restless mind, while steady and rhythmic breathing leads to serenity and clarity. This is the key to mastering emotions, not by force or suppression, but by synchronizing with the natural order that already exists. Fletcher describes how, when we begin to breathe in harmony with the tattvas, we no longer battle against our own feelings. Instead, we flow with them, guiding them as one would guide a river, shaping its course not through resistance but through understanding. But what are these tattvas, and how do they influence us? According to Fletcher, they are the 5 fundamental energies that govern existence. They are the invisible forces behind sensation, thought, and action, and they pervade all things. Each one carries a distinct quality, affecting both the physical body and the emotional state. The key to stability, to inner peace, lies in breathing in a way that balances these energies rather than allowing them to dominate uncontrollably. A hurried breath, shallow and erratic, brings instability, just as a turbulent wind unsettles the surface of a lake. In contrast, a deep, steady breath mirrors the quiet depths of still waters, reflecting clarity and peace. This is where the mastery of breath becomes the mastery of life itself. To use breath correctly is to gain a measure of control over not only one's emotions, but also the broader experiences of existence. Fletcher emphasizes that the tattvas do not act in isolation. They are part of a grander unity, intertwined with the rhythms of nature and the cosmos. The moment one begins to breathe consciously, a transformation takes place. The body, once merely an instrument of unconscious reactions, becomes attuned to a higher order of existence. Thoughts grow clearer, emotional storms dissipate, a new awareness emerges, one that is not reactive but intentional. In this understanding, there is liberation. To know that the breath can shift the course of emotion is to break free from the illusion that we are at the mercy of circumstance. Anxiety, anger, sorrow, these are not forces beyond control, but states that arise and fade, according to the rhythms of breath. Fletcher's teachings illuminate a path where we are no longer captives of fleeting emotions, but participants in a grander harmony, sculpting our inner state as an artist shapes a masterpiece. As one deepens in this practice, a remarkable shift occurs. The breath becomes more than a function, it becomes a language. Each inhalation, each exhalation, carries meaning, shaping perception, guiding thought. It is in this space of conscious breathing that clarity arises, where fear gives way to confidence, and where restlessness is replaced by calm. Fletcher describes this as the true potential of human existence, not to be lost in chaos, but to find order within the breath itself. With time, the awareness of breath extends beyond moments of practice and into everyday life. The pause between breaths becomes a sanctuary, a moment of stillness in which clarity is found. The body, mind, and emotions become instruments of a greater symphony, no longer dissonant, but in tune with the larger forces of existence. The shift is subtle, yet profound. One no longer reacts instinctively to the world, but responds with measured awareness. In this mastery of breath, life itself transforms. Fletcher's insights reveal that the universality of the tattvas means we are never separate from the greater whole. We are participants in a rhythm that extends far beyond ourselves. To breathe is not just to sustain life, but to engage with it fully, to dance with the very forces that shape reality. This understanding turns each breath into an opportunity, each moment into a chance to align with the deeper currents of existence. The breath is more than air. It is the key to mastery, the gateway to true emotional equilibrium. The realization dawns that control over breath is not about restraint, but about harmony. It is not about fighting against emotions, but understanding their flow. In this understanding, one discovers a peace that does not waver, a calm that remains unshaken by the turmoil of the world. The wisdom Fletcher imparts is timeless, a call to awaken to the rhythms that have always been present, waiting for those who are ready to listen. And as one breathes with awareness, a quiet certainty emerges, that within the breath lies the power to shape not only emotions, but the very essence of life itself. Fletcher now invites us to look beyond breath as mere movement, to understand its connection to the very energy that animates all things. This is where the deeper mysteries of prana unfold, where the breath ceases to be just air and becomes something far more potent, a force of renewal, a rhythm that aligns with the hidden tides of existence itself. Fletcher introduces us to the great all-pervading force known as Akasha. This is not merely the expanse of the sky or the void of space, it is the origin, the unseen reservoir of energy that connects all things. And through the mastery of breath, one may come to understand and harness this force, influencing not just the body but the emotions and the mind itself. To grasp the significance of Akasha is to step into a greater awareness of the forces that shape existence. This is not an abstract philosophy, but a reality woven into every breath. The breath we draw is not isolated to the lungs, it carries within it the imprint of Akasha, the force that gives rise to all other elements, all other energies. It is from this source that emotion finds its rhythm, that the tides of thought ebb and flow, that the body responds to the unseen waves of the universe. In the modern world, emotions are often seen as fleeting, uncontrollable waves influenced by external factors beyond our reach. But Fletcher suggests something different, something profound. Emotion is not random. It is a pattern, a rhythm, dictated by the very breath that sustains life. If one can attune themselves to the finer forces of breath, they can in turn harmonize their emotions with the great current of the universe. This is the true power of Akasha, the understanding that one is not merely subject to emotion but can guide it, mold it, shape it, just as the wind shapes the clouds in the sky. It begins with stillness, not the absence of movement, but a stillness of mind, a moment where the breath is observed, where one becomes aware of its depth, its cadence. This is the first step toward the realization of Akasha. Each inhalation draws from the infinite, filling the body with the subtle yet potent force that underlies all matter. Each exhalation releases that which is disharmonious, setting forth a cycle of purification, of attunement. The ancient seers understood that this secret long before modern science sought to quantify breath in terms of oxygen and carbon dioxide. To them, breath was life's pulse, the sacred rhythm that connects all beings to the great expanse of creation. Fletcher builds upon this wisdom, explaining that the breath carries within it the subtle vibrations of Akasha, vibrations that can be directed with conscious intention. And herein lies the key. The emotions that often feel overwhelming, chaotic, beyond control, are in truth manifestations of one's breath. A scattered breath leads to scattered thoughts. A deep, steady breath cultivates clarity and peace. To work with Akasha is to understand that breath is not merely mechanical. It is a vehicle for the highest forces of consciousness. The tides of emotion do not arise in isolation. They are influenced by unseen forces, forces that breathe through all life. To engage with these forces is not to suppress emotion but to refine it, to bring it into harmony with a greater rhythm. When the breath is erratic, the mind is restless. When the breath is deep and measured, emotion finds its balance. This is not a mere theory, it's an experience waiting to be realized. One does not need to seek an isolated retreat to practice this awareness. The truth of Akasha is present in every moment, in every breath drawn. When faced with turmoil, pause. Observe the breath. Is it shallow, rapid, or unsteady? The body follows the mind, and the mind follows the breath. By shifting the breath, lengthening the exhalation, deepening the inhalation, the emotional state begins to shift as well. This is not a matter of suppression, of forcing oneself into calmness, but rather of aligning with the natural order, with the all-pervading force that breathes through all things. Fletcher describes Akasha as the key to mastery, not mastery over others, but over the self. It is the unseen current beneath all conscious thought, beneath all sensation, beneath all feeling. And yet, it is not distant. It is as near as the next breath, as accessible as the quiet moment between inhalation and exhalation. It is in the space that one can find the stillness of mind necessary to guide emotion, to cultivate a presence that is neither reactive nor detached, but deeply engaged with life in its truest form. Consider the moments of heightened emotion, the sharp pang of anger, the weight of sorrow, the restless pull of anxiety. These are not enemies to be fought nor obstacles to be suppressed. They are signals, messages carried by breath, revealing the rhythm one has unconsciously adopted. By turning to breath, by drawing upon the force of Akasha, one begins the process of transformation. Breath by breath, the internal landscape shifts. That which was once chaotic finds order. That which was once turbulent finds peace. This is not a philosophy to be merely understood, it is a practice to be lived. The breath, when consciously engaged, becomes a bridge to the unseen, a conduit to the deeper forces that shape emotion and thought. It is through this understanding that one moves beyond mere reaction and into true mastery. Fletcher's insights reveal that to work with breath is to work with the very foundation of existence itself. Breath, at its core, is a reminder that one is not separate from the greater whole, that the unseen forces guiding the stars are the same forces moving through the body. Akasha is not an abstract concept, it is the very essence of life, the unseen rhythm that, when embraced, brings forth balance and clarity. And in this realization, emotion ceases to be something feared or avoided. Instead, it becomes a dance, one that flows with the breath, one that aligns with the greater order of creation. In every inhalation there is renewal. In every exhalation there is release. And in the space between, there is a great stillness, a doorway to understanding. The breath does not lie. It reflects the inner world with perfect clarity. To breathe with awareness is to live with awareness. To breathe with intention is to shape one's reality. This is the lesson of Akasha, the great all-pervading force that, when understood, becomes the key to mastery over the self. So as the breath moves through you, let it be more than an unconscious act. Let it be a guide, a teacher, a force of transformation. The mastery of breath is the mastery of emotion, and within this mastery lies the gateway to a life lived not in reaction, but in harmony with the vast, unseen forces that shape existence itself. Now, in every inhalation, we draw from something greater than ourselves. In every exhalation, we give back to it. This exchange is not just biological, it's deeply spiritual, an unseen communion between the self and the ever-flowing forces of nature. To breathe consciously, then, is to recognize this connection. There is a rhythm to life, a pulse that hums beneath the surface of existence. Unseen, but ever-present. It weaves through the air we breathe, the tides that rise and fall, the unseen currents that govern both the world and the body. Fletcher speaks of this rhythm as something profound, something powerful, a master key to understanding not just life itself, but our emotions, our thoughts, and our very sense of being. This rhythm, she reveals, is dictated by the tattvas, universal forces that shape our experiences in ways we barely comprehend, and it is through breath, through the careful mastery of its cadence, that we gain control over them. But what are these tattvas? They are, Fletcher explains, the vibratory principles that govern all things. They flow in cycles, each possessing distinct qualities, each shaping our consciousness in its own way. Some bring clarity, others confusion. Some bestow strength, others sap vitality. They manifest through breath, and in doing so, they touch the core of our emotions. Every inhale, every exhale is an invitation for a specific force to take root within us. Most drift through life unaware of this, letting the waves of these energies pull them in different directions without realizing they hold the power to navigate them. Anger flares without warning, fears take root like an unwanted guest. A mind clouded by doubt spirals further, never questioning why or how these emotions arise. But Fletcher urges us to look deeper, to see the unseen. She tells us that emotions are not random, they are not the product of mere circumstance, they are instead the echoes of these tactic forces, shaped and summoned by the way we breathe. Consider, for instance, the difference between a hurried, shallow breath and a deep, deliberate inhale. The former invites restlessness, an unease that lingers in the bones. The latter welcomes calm, steadying the mind like an anchor in the midst of a storm. This, Fletcher explains, is because each breath cycle aligns us with a specific tattva. When left to chance, we become victims of whatever force happens to take hold, but when we breathe with awareness, when we shape our breath with intention, we take back control, we summon balance, we banish disarray, we become the masters of our emotions, rather than their captives. The breath, she tells us, is no trivial thing. It is a sacred key, unlocking doors to hidden realms of understanding. The tattvas move in patterns, and by knowing these patterns we can work with them rather than against them. There are moments when certain forces are dominant, and to act in opposition to them is to invite struggle. But to harmonize our breath with these rhythms, to sync our being with the ebb and flow of these energies, is to unlock a power few ever touch. She speaks too of the unseen consequences of ignorance. Those who disregard these truths, who breathe without thought or rhythm, fall prey to emotional chaos. They may wake one morning feeling hopeful, only for a nameless anxiety to creep in by midday. They may find themselves restless, unable to concentrate, their thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind, and yet, had they understood the tattvas, had they known how to wield their breath, they could have prevented this turmoil before it began. This is not superstition. It is not an empty philosophy. It is, Fletcher insists, a science older than time, one that wise minds have studied and refined for generations. The knowledge has always been there, waiting for those willing to grasp it. And for those who do, life transforms. No longer are emotions unpredictable tides, no longer is the mind at the mercy of unseen forces. Instead, there is mastery. There is peace. There is an understanding that with each breath, we shape not just our physical bodies, but the very fabric of our inner world. She speaks of practices, of methods that allow one to tune their breath with these cycles, to summon the right energy at the right time. It is not enough to simply breathe. One must breathe correctly in accordance with the natural order. A poorly timed inhale, an exhale that does not flow as it should, these seemingly small things hold great consequences. And so, Fletcher urges, let breath be more than an unconscious act. Let it be a tool, a guide, a force that carries you toward equilibrium. Observe its rhythm. Feel the shifts in energy as you inhale, as you exhale. Take note of the moments when clarity arrives unbidden, when emotions shift without cause, and then take control. Breathe with intention, shape your breath, and in doing so, shape your reality. Because the truth, Fletcher reveals, is this: emotion is not a mystery. It is not something we must endure, helpless against its tides. It is instead a reflection of the energies we invite, of the rhythms we allow to take hold. And by mastering the breath, by understanding the tattvas and the way they flow through us, we do not just control our emotions, we transcend them. We become something more, something greater, something in harmony with the unseen forces that shape not just our minds but the world itself. So breathe as if it matters, because, as Fletcher shows us, it does. Yet the breath does more than guide emotion. It carries something deeper, something vital, an invisible current that flows within and beyond us, sustaining not just life but the very essence of being. Fletcher now turns our attention to this force, this unseen yet ever-present energy. It moves through every breath, every pulse, every thought. It is prana, the life force that does not merely animate the body but shapes the spirit, linking us to the boundless energy of the universe. To understand breath is to understand prana. And to understand prana is to step beyond the physical, to recognize that the energy we draw is not just oxygen, but something far greater. This force, as Fletcher describes in her work, is teas, the fire of life, and it is through the breath that you stoke or subdue its flames. Breath is not just the act of drawing air in and letting it go. It is rhythm, a silent conductor orchestrating the harmony or disharmony of the body and mind. When your breath is erratic, so too are your emotions. When it is controlled, steady and attuned to nature's rhythm, you find balance. Fletcher speaks of Tejas as a vital force, a principle of fire that influences thought, passion, and even one's ability to act. Without its glow, the mind is dull, the spirit listless. But when it blazes too fiercely, unchecked and wild, it consumes rather than empowers. Consider the power of anger. It rises like flames in dry wood, quick and uncontrollable. Tejas, when unbalanced, turns anger into destruction, reducing reason to ash. But when directed, when governed by conscious breath, it becomes the fire of transformation. Passion replaces rage, determination replaces recklessness, and clarity emerges where once there was only blind emotion. Fletcher emphasizes that the secret to mastering Tejas lies in the breath. Each inhalation is a bellows, feeding the fire within, and each exhalation is a sculptor, shaping its expression. The breath of a frantic mind is shallow, inconsistent, fuel thrown haphazardly onto flames. But deep, rhythmic breath turns Tejas into an engine, burning steadily, refining thought, will, and purpose. To understand this is to understand the nature of breath itself. Fletcher explains that breath is more than a physical necessity. It is the means by which the tattvic forces, the elemental energies, move through us. Tejas governs vitality, warmth, the drive to achieve, but without balance it warps into agitation, impatience, or burnout. Breathing in a slow, measured rhythm allows Tejas to work as it should, not as a consuming inferno, but as a controlled, radiant force that fuels the body and mind. In moments of frustration, when tension tightens around the chest and fists clench of their own accord, the natural inclination is to exhale sharply, to let the breath escape in a huff of irritation. But this, Fletcher warns, only fans the fire further. The secret, instead, is to deepen the breath, to regulate its intake, a slow inhalation through the nose, a pause, a measured release. This is how Tejas is harnessed, rather than left untamed. Even beyond the realm of anger, the fire of Tejas plays a role in how we experience desire, ambition, even joy. It is the spark behind creativity, the heat of inspiration. When you are deeply engaged in something you love, be it art, music, or a moment of profound understanding, your breath naturally falls into a rhythm that nurtures Tejas. Your body aligns with its power, your mind sharpens, and clarity emerges as if from glowing embers. But Tejas also carries a warning. Fletcher speaks of the dangers of allowing this fire to dominate unchecked. Just as a flame deprived of oxygen sputters and dies, so too does the overworked mind, when it has not been given the breath it needs. Burnout is not merely exhaustion, it is Tejas turned against itself, consuming the very energy it is meant to sustain. And so, she urges, breathe. Not just when the world demands it of you, not just when you feel weary, but as a conscious act, a means of directing your inner forces. To master your breath is to master your emotions. When anger rises, lengthen your exhalation. Allow the heat to dissipate. When passion stirs and inspiration calls, breathe deeply, allowing Tejas to illuminate rather than burn. Fletcher's teachings reveal that breath is more than survival. It is a dialogue with the self. Each inhalation invites power, each exhalation refines it. The fire within is neither friend nor foe. It is a force waiting to be understood. And in understanding, you wield it not with fear but with purpose. Through the lens of ancient wisdom, Tejas is not merely an element of the unseen, but a tangible force that governs human experience. Those who let their breathing become shallow, erratic, or ungoverned will find their emotions taking the same path. A restless breath feeds restlessness in thought. An anxious breath invites turmoil into the heart. Fletcher reminds us that the breath is the bridge between the seen and the unseen, between bodily existence and the deeper currents of being. With every breath, you are shaping your internal fire, whether you realize it or not. Each inhalation carries forth life, each exhalation releases what no longer serves. If you hold your breath in moments of distress, suppressing the natural flow, Tejas will not be tamed, it will only grow wild, manifesting as tension, as frustration, as the overwhelming heat of emotions that seem beyond control. But to breathe with awareness is to take hold of the reins. The steady rhythm of breath tempers Tejas, guiding it to serve rather than consume. Fletcher teaches that, in this understanding, we reclaim something essential, our power to shape our own emotional landscape, to keep the fires burning brightly without being burned ourselves. When the flames within seem too intense, remember this. Pause. Inhale deeply. Let your breath expand within you. Hold for a moment, feeling the warmth without allowing it to overwhelm, and then release, slowly, intentionally, allowing Tejas to settle, to refine, to transform. This is the art of balance, the mastery of self through the mastery of breath. And so she teaches us to breathe, not as an afterthought, but as a master of your own fire, your own life. For in each breath lies the key to balance, to emotion, to the very essence of who you are. The breath is your tool, your ally, your means of shaping the fire within, and through it, you hold the power not just to endure life's storms, but to thrive within them, radiant and unwavering. But a flame, no matter how steady, must be carried forward by something greater, something that moves, that flows, that sustains. Here, Fletcher turns our attention to the great unseen currents that surround us, the vast atmospheric tides of prana that surge and recede in a rhythm as ancient as time itself. These currents are not random, nor are they beyond our influence. Just as a sailor learns to read the winds and set his course accordingly, so too must we learn to navigate the unseen forces that shape our inner world. Fletcher speaks of breath not as mere inhalation and exhalation, but as the means by which the elemental forces of the universe move through us. Among these, Apas and Pravithi stand as vital influences, each governing aspects of happiness, stability, and emotional depth. Apas, the element of water, flows through the body like a hidden river, nourishing the spirit with calm and fluidity. It is the essence of serenity, the force that allows emotions to move without resistance, to ebb and flow as they are meant to. Fletcher tells us that when Apas is balanced within, one does not cling to sorrow nor become overwhelmed by joy. Instead, emotions move in harmony, never stagnant, never forced. It is through breath that Apas is either welcomed or obstructed, for an irregular breath disrupts its rhythm, creating inner turmoil, where there should be peace. Picture the moment before sleep, when the breath naturally slows, deepens, and carries the mind toward a state of rest. This is the influence of Apas at work, soothing, cooling, guiding the emotions into still waters. When the breath follows this rhythm consciously, even in waking moments, the same sense of peace pervades the soul. Fletcher describes how conscious breathing allows one to channel Apas, dissolving tension, melting the rigid edges of worry, and softening the weight of distress. Yet balance is key. Just as still waters can become stagnant, too much Apas without the grounding force of Pravithi leads to an overly passive spirit, a mind that drifts without direction. And so, the breath must also call upon the influence of Pravithi, the earth element, which grants steadiness, resolve, and the quiet strength of inner security. Fletcher describes Pravithi as the deep, solid foundation upon which emotions can rest, preventing them from spiraling into chaos. Where Apas offers fluidity, Pravithi offers form, ensuring that joy is not fleeting, that peace is not easily disturbed. Pravithi is present in every steady breath, in the moments of quiet certainty, in the deep exhalations that bring release after tension. It manifests in the breath of a person standing firm in the face of uncertainty, their emotions not swept away by passing storms, but anchored in a deeper sense of knowing. Fletcher explains that when the breath is shallow, hurried, or unsteady, Pravithi's ground force is weakened, leaving one vulnerable to instability, to emotions that rise and fall without control. But through deliberate breath, full, deep, and rhythmic, Pravithi takes its rightful place, offering security and contentment that do not waver with circumstance. Together, Apas and Pravithi weave the fabric of emotional well-being. They are the forces that determine whether one is tossed about by emotion or whether one moves with grace and steadiness. Fletcher speaks of the breath as the bridge between these elements, the means by which we cultivate harmony between the fluidity of feeling and the strength of inner composure. A breath that is rushed, erratic, or strained disturbs this balance, leading to emotional exhaustion or numbness. But when breath follows a natural, unforced rhythm, these elements align, allowing for a state of quiet happiness that does not require external validation. There are moments in life when happiness seems distant, when the weight of uncertainty or sorrow presses too heavily upon the spirit. In these moments, the breath holds the power to restore, to remind the mind and body that peace is not found in seeking control but in allowing balance. Fletcher teaches that Apas invites us to let emotions flow, to experience them without fear, while Pravithi teaches us to stand firm, to recognize that no wave of feeling can sweep away the self when it is anchored in awareness. Breath, then, is not simply a function of the body, it is the tool through which one masters emotion. A breath held in anxiety tightens the chest, stifles the mind, and disconnects one from the natural rhythm of being. But a breath taken with intent, with depth of steadiness, welcomes the soothing influence of Apas and the unwavering support of Pravithi. Fletcher's words remind us that happiness is not the result of external forces, but the natural state of a being in harmony with breath, with rhythm, with the elements that compose life itself. Consider the difference between a sigh of relief and a gasp of panic. The breath in each instance shapes the emotional experience. A deep, intentional breath signals to the body that all is well, that balance remains. An erratic breath, however, disturbs this equilibrium, sending ripples of unease through the mind and spirit. Fletcher insists that by mastering the breath, one masters the emotions, ensuring that joy is not fleeting but ever present, not something to be pursued, but something to be uncovered within. Through the conscious practice of rhythmic breathing, Apas and Pravithi work together, bringing forth a state of happiness that is both peaceful and strong. Happiness, as Fletcher describes it, is not an ecstatic high, nor is it the absence of pain. It is the quiet assurance that one's inner world is steady, regardless of what happens outside. It is the contentment that comes not from the fulfillment of desires, but from the realization that the self, when in balance, needs little else. The modern world often pushes the idea that happiness is to be chased, that it is something acquired through achievement, possession, or validation. But Fletcher's wisdom reveals a different truth, that happiness is already within, waiting to be accessed through breath, through the gentle guidance of Apas and the firm support of Pravithi. It does not demand effort so much as awareness. It does not require struggle, only a willingness to breathe in a way that welcomes harmony. And so let the breath be slow, steady, deep, not forced, not hurried, but natural, like the rhythm of the ocean meeting the shore. In this rhythm, happiness is found, not in fleeting moments, but in the quiet assurance that balance exists within. Fletcher's teachings remind us that we are not separate from the forces of the universe, but are shaped by them, moved by them, and ultimately capable of mastering them through the simple act of breathing. Through the wisdom of Apas and Pravithi, through the rhythm of breath, happiness ceases to be a distant dream and becomes the steady undercurrent of everyday life. This is the gift of Fletcher's teachings, the secret woven into each breath, waiting to be embraced. So breathe, not just as a necessity, but as a practice, as a way of being. In the space between each inhalation and exhalation, there lies a truth older than time. Happiness is not something to be found, but something to be remembered, something to be breathed into existence. But Fletcher takes us deeper still. If happiness can be breathed into existence, then what of sorrow? What of fear? What of those tides of emotion that seem to rise unbidden, sweeping us away before we can steady ourselves? She tells us that our emotions, too, are shaped by breath, that they are not random, not beyond our influence, but bound to the currents of prana that move through us. And just as the great atmospheric tides shape the winds and waters of the world, so too do these unseen forces dictate the rise and fall of feeling within us. Fletcher, in her study of the rhythmic breath, unveils a truth as ancient as time itself. The breath is not simply air, but prana, the life force that weaves through all things. She speaks of the atmospheric currents of prana, the invisible streams of energy that carry the essence of balance, vitality, and emotional harmony. Prana is not stagnant, it moves, flows, and dances through the air, carried upon unseen tides that shift with nature's pulse. Just as the great rivers of the earth carve landscapes, these atmospheric currents shape the inner world of the human spirit. They are not mere metaphors, but tangible realities, real forces that exert their influence in ways both subtle and profound. Fletcher tells us that the act of breathing is a means of connection. Every inhale draws in not only oxygen, but also the finer, subtler forces that sustain life itself. Every exhale is a release, a letting go of what no longer serves. But how one breathes determines whether these atmospheric currents work in harmony with the body or against it. This understanding is ancient, woven into the wisdom of the ages, yet so often forgotten in the hurried pace of modern life. Fletcher reminds us that the great sages and seers knew the secret. To master breath is to master one's emotions. The air around us is not empty. It is charged with energy, filled with the subtle power of prana, waiting to be harnessed. But this power does not yield itself to the frantic or the fearful. It responds only to those who breathe with intention, with awareness, with reverence. The currents of prana shift with the cycles of the day, just as the winds change with the seasons. Fletcher explains that the quality of breath taken in the early morning differs from that of the afternoon or evening. Dawn carries with it a vibrancy, a freshness that infuses prana with renewal. To breathe deeply in these hours is to drink from a wellspring of vitality. The midday breath, by contrast, is infused with intensity, the sun's fire stirring the currents of the atmosphere. Evening brings a gentler tide, the cooling currents of prana inviting rest and reflection. And so, to breathe in harmony with these natural rhythms is to align with the greater intelligence that governs all life. But more than the external shifts, Fletcher speaks of the internal currents, the way prana moves within. It does not merely enter and exit the body, it circulates, flowing through unseen channels that connect mind, heart, and soul. When one breathes deeply, drawing in the fullness of prana, these currents are nourished, carrying strength to the weary, peace to the anxious, and clarity to the clouded mind. But when breath is erratic, these inner currents falter and the effects ripple outward. Tension rises, fear tightens its grip, emotions become storms rather than breezes. Fletcher teaches that breath is the great harmonizer, the bridge between chaos and calm. A single deep breath taken with intention can change the course of a moment. It can halt the rising tide of anger, soften the sharp edges of grief, and restore balance where imbalance has taken root. And yet, breath is often neglected, left to function without thought, without care. To reclaim it is to reclaim the ability to navigate life's emotional landscapes with grace and steadiness. The key, she reveals, is not simply to breathe, but to breathe in rhythm. Nature itself moves in cycles, in pulses of expansion and contraction, ebb and flow. The breath must do the same. To inhale fully and exhale completely, to find the natural cadence that allows prana to move without obstruction, this is the secret. It is not about force, but about allowing, not about control, but about attunement. When the breath moves in this way, emotions follow suit. Anxiety, which thrives on short, shallow breathing, cannot maintain its grip when the breath deepens. Anger, which flares in rapid bursts, cannot sustain itself when the exhale lengthens. Sadness, which weighs heavily upon the chest, begins to lift when prana flows freely. Each emotion, Fletcher reminds us, has its breath pattern. To change the breath is to change the emotional state, not through suppression but through transformation. Yet, this is not a practice reserved for moments of distress alone. To breathe in harmony with the atmospheric currents of prana is to cultivate a state of well-being that is not easily shaken. It is to fortify the mind against turmoil before it arises, to create a foundation of inner peace upon which life's inevitable challenges have less impact. When breath is rhythmic, emotions do not swing wildly, they move with grace, with fluidity, with a sense of flow. Fletcher's wisdom calls not for effortful striving, but for gentle remembrance. To remember, to breathe. To remember that the air around us is alive with energy, that each inhale and exhale is a choice to align with balance or to resist it. There is no force required, only awareness, no rigid discipline, only the willingness to return again and again to the simple act of breathing with presence. This is the essence of emotional mastery, not through suppression, not through avoidance, but through breath, through the sacred rhythmic movement of prana within. And so, with each breath, one shapes not only the body, but the spirit, not only the moment, but the very course of one's life. To breathe deeply is to live fully. To breathe with awareness is to feel with clarity. To breathe in harmony with the unseen currents of prana is to walk through life with a steady heart, an untroubled mind, and a spirit that knows peace not as an abstraction, but as a lived experience. Fletcher now tells us that breath is the vehicle of prana, the force that circulates within, touching every nerve, awakening every cell. And to understand breath is to understand this movement, this silent rhythm that governs not just our inner world, but our connection to all that is. Breath is not confined to the lungs, nor is it merely the means by which we sustain ourselves. It is the great circulatory force of prana, the vital energy that animates the body and connects us to the vast currents of the universe. Fletcher describes how this life force moves within us, how it travels along invisible channels, nourishing, balancing, and restoring. And crucially, how our emotions, our very state of being, are dictated by the rhythm and quality of this circulation. When breath is erratic, shallow or inconsistent, the currents of prana falter. It is in these moments, when anxiety grips, when sorrow lingers, when anger flares, that we feel out of control. But what if control was never lost? What if, in truth, it was only our breath that strayed from its natural rhythm? Fletcher reminds us that the answer is always within us. The stillness we seek, the peace we long for, is waiting in the silent depths of a steady breath. There is a hidden intelligence to prana, an unseen wisdom in its flow. It does not merely sustain us, it guides us. It nourishes the body as the bloodstream does, but its influence extends beyond the physical. It governs emotion, thought, and even the subtler forces of intuition and spiritual awareness. Fletcher teaches us that just as the river follows its course to the ocean, so too must prana be allowed to move freely within us, unhindered by tension, resistance, or the disruption of unhealthy habits. To breathe fully is to live fully. To breathe in harmony is to feel in harmony. The challenge, then, is mastery. If we do not consciously direct our breath, we become subject to the chaotic currents of life, buffeted by every passing emotion, every shifting mood. But if we learn to guide it, if we allow the breath to flow with measured intention, we reclaim control, not just of our physical well-being, but of our very state of mind. Fletcher urges us to cultivate this awareness, to recognize that the key to emotional balance has always been in our hands, or rather, in our lungs. Consider the moments when joy takes hold, how breath expands, how it fills us effortlessly, how it moves in sync with the heart's upliftment. Contrast this with the moments of sorrow, how the chest tightens, how the breath becomes shallow, reluctant, as if holding on to pain. The circulation of prana reflects our emotional state, but it also offers us a way out of suffering. By choosing to deepen the breath, by guiding it into the rhythm of balance, we alter the very chemistry of our being. Fletcher describes this as a law of nature, that harmony, in breath creates harmony in emotion. It is not mere philosophy, it is a tangible force, a truth that can be experienced. This is why the ancient practices of breath control, or pranayama, were not simply exercises, but sacred rites, methods of aligning with the cosmic pulse. Fletcher speaks of these principles, though she presents them not as esoteric secrets, but as universal truths, accessible to all. She explains that when breath is rhythmic, the circulation of prana becomes effortless, unhindered, and with this effortless flow comes clarity, a quieting of the storms within, an ease that radiates through the entire being. Yet, there is a responsibility in this knowledge. To understand the power of breath is to understand that we are not at the mercy of our emotions, we are not helpless before anger, nor must we drown in sadness. The currents of prana can be directed, and with them, so too can the tides of our emotions. The key is discipline, a conscious return to breath in every moment of turmoil, an unwavering trust that within the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation lies the path to inner peace. Fletcher reminds us that we are not passive observers of our emotions, we are their architects, and the tool with which we build our inner world is breath itself. If we ignore it, we allow chance and circumstance to dictate our state of being. But if we embrace it, if we learn to listen to its rhythm, we unlock a power that has always been ours. The breath is the bridge between body and mind, between chaos and calm, between the self we are and the self we wish to become. The circulation of prana is not merely a process, it is a lesson, a guide, a quiet force that, if honoured, will lead us unfailingly to balance. And so the final invitation: breathe. Breathe with awareness. Let each inhalation gather strength, each exhalation grant release. Make breath not an unconscious act, but a conscious one, the foundation upon which all else rests. For in the circulation of prana lies the secret of balance, the mastery of emotion, the key to peace, and it is yours to claim. In every breath you take